how do you best learn? What are you motivated by? It's like almost some of the exact same things. Learning styles to me means like how do you learn? How do you learn best? And then connecting, like often we will say, like, I learn best by, like you were saying, Chad, with others in a group, or I learn best working alone, or I learn best by listening. So many different kinds of learners, but I think the clues are actually in our strengths.
Hi, and welcome to the Thoughtful Talent Show. I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching.
And I'm Chad Ahern of Talent Teams Consulting.
This season, we're welcoming fellow coaches back to the show to explore how people can move beyond naming and claiming their talents to start to aim their talents. We're calling this season Strengths Applied.
Today, we're here to talk about learning styles and professional development. And we are so grateful to have one of our fabulous coach friends back to join us again. She's a friend of the show. We are welcoming back Cindy Butts, who is a talent development coach and HR consultant with her own company at Grow with Strengths. She's located in Barrington, Rhode Island, unless she's moved on me. And Cindy, what are your top 5 for us today?
My top 5 today, and they have been the same top 5 for many, many years. I am achiever, input, strategic, activator, and woo. And I lead
Woo!
with strategic thinking themes. So I make,
Wonderful.
yeah. So
All right. Well, we're happy to
Welcome
have you
back.
here. Yes, welcome back to the show.
so excited to be here.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, our topic is learning styles and professional development. And Jen, I want to ask you to lead us off with why did we invite Cindy back? Why are we talking about this? Lay the groundwork for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chad, it was kind of interesting. Like we made the episode list a while ago, and I don't know that we've been really paying attention to what's coming up next or, what came before it. But we've been picking at this thread of learning styles for the last couple of episodes. I feel like it keeps coming up. So I'm so excited that we have Cindy here with us today so that she can talk with us. I think I wanted to talk about it because when we talk about professional development, I think it's good for people to understand, or us on our own to understand how we learn best. I think the learning styles and strengths really can go hand in hand. When people know how they learn best, I think they can start to use their talents more intentionally for ways that can maximize what that learning looks like for them. Personally, I think talking about the different learning styles can really help to reduce the shame around if you don't get it, right off the bat, like others do. And so it maybe minimizes that feeling, right? Like you're different in some way and maybe not as good as others because you learn differently than others. So those were really my big whys and the reason I was hoping we would talk about this today. Do you have any others you'd like to add, or maybe stats around learning?
Yeah, so I would echo a lot of what you just said, Jen. I think that for a lot of organizations, I think we actually touched on this in the last episode. A lot of organizations standardize, how people are supposed to learn things, or here's this big manual you need to study if you're onboarding. We did that in the onboarding episode.
Right.
And the same thing sort of goes out in, like I was in higher education for a long time. It was all about conferences. You went and you attended conferences, and that was kind of the way you learned the field I was in. And I don't think that always jives with each person. And so I think, we're going to talk a little bit more about how talents come into that, how different styles come to that. But in terms of the stats, this is a really important topic right now for a couple reasons. And I'm actually going to share a couple stats, not just my standard one. So
Yay.
we as coaches, Gallup certified coaches, know that their longstanding research has shown that the opportunity to develop one's talents is more important than role, pay, title, your position within the organization. It's key. And so I think a lot of organizations and a lot of people kind of get lost on that they always think about the next rung on the ladder instead of, do I really have the opportunity to develop what I do at my absolute best? So that's just decades of research. More recently, LinkedIn has put out some research late last year. 70% of workers say learning improves their sense of connection to the workplace. So just the opportunity to learn within their work environment is key. 94% of employees stay longer at companies that invest in their professional development. That also comes from LinkedIn. And here's a really great one for our new incoming workforce and the managers of those people. 53% of Gen Z workers value learning for their career progress, and that's 16% higher than any other working generation in the workforce right now.
Oh,
So they beat boomers, they beat Gen Z, and they beat millennials in terms of the importance of professional development
wow.
and learning within their work. Um, so this is a key topic, and this is why we have Cindy
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Um, and Jen, I know you're ready to go with our first question for our awesome Cindy, who's
Yes.
standing ready to start engaging with us.
So those stats were crazy. And I think it speaks to me, even though I don't have learner in my top five, which I'm super excited today. I am not surrounded by learners. There's just one other one in the episode with me. The last few, Cindy, we've had just packed full of learners. Um,
I
but
have
I'm
it at
super,
number 7.
of course you do. I love you guys so much. Okay, well, so what I'm hoping like we could start even with just understanding and like sharing our own personal experiences with this, like either understanding our learning styles or our own professional development and what that looks like. So, Cindy, I want to like just toss that at you first. Like, what has been your experience, and what would you like to share with us about this?
Well, so thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to talk about this. And when the different topics came up, and I was looking at the different topics to participate and support you in this podcast, I was geeking out about this particular topic. In my HR background, when I was inside of companies before I started Grow with Strengths, and doing my own coaching, I spent so much time looking at learning styles, how people learn, and kind of connecting that with performance, right? So I want to talk about that a little bit. That
Yeah,
topic kind of took me back, and it's so we can talk about that a lot. I think there's a lot to be gained from just thinking about what are the tools, what are the systems, how can you weave strengths into your performance management conversations
yeah,
and tracking progress, and then looking at learning around that as well. Um, that's that's a lot. I have
that's
to
great.
warn everyone, I lead with strategic thinking themes. So I have input, strategic, learner, and ideation in my top 10. So you can already tell, right? I'm not a super linear thinker. I think in circles and arrows, and we'll go around and
Yeah.
around.
I
So
love it.
just warning.
Yeah. It takes all sorts of us, right? We all come into
Absolutely.
these conversations with different thoughts and different ways of thinking about this. And
Right.
I think that's one of the things that we've always really appreciated about having you on the
Yes.
show, Cindy, is that, Jen and I probably have a little bit more of like, I know Jen, your activator achiever is always about like, what can I start?
Yep.
What can I finish? I'm, have the high deliberative responsibility, which I know Jen also does. So we're very sort of, and I've got discipline as number 6. So it's all about having a structure.
Right.
So Cindy, you always disrupt my thinking a little bit, which is part of the reason we have these conversations.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
I'm curious. I want to dig a little further. Jen asked a really great, starter question there, but Cindy, you mentioned something about tying talents to performance and talents to professional development. I would love for you to go just sort of like one step further. What do you mean by that? And given your HR background, how have you seen that play out, whether for yourself or for some of the teams you've helped professionally develop?
Mhm.
Go a little deeper. You got my curiosity piqued.
Yeah, so I guess starting with performance goals, right? I'll go a step back, zoom out a little bit, which is what I do, right? And think
Yes.
like, what are your goals? what are your top 3 to 5 goals that define what you're paid to do, right? And starting with those, right? What are you paid to do? What does success look like? I love really specific, Chad, you would write these well, very specific, like maybe 2 lines for each goal, right? Like I
Mhm.
was always in HR, like talent and talent acquisition goals, talent development goals. Like, so think of like buckets and then very specific goals. And then looking at your strengths, how are you going to use your strengths to get there? And the learning, right, is kind of in
Mhm.
between that. That's how I think about that. If you don't start with the performance goals, then that's the achiever. I lead with number one achiever, right? And strategic. If you don't start with that, then your learning may be cool. It may be great. It may be, but it might not get you toward your goals. So I love starting with it can be on a Google Doc, it can be in Excel, it can be in a journal, right? But something that's very specific that you and your manager have shared that is agreed upon. Like, this is what success looks like, right? And then working backwards from there, how do your strengths support you to reach those goals? It sounds so
Yeah.
simple, right? But having those 3 to 5 performance goals in front of you every day, um, and having your top 5 or maybe your top 10 in front of you every day, right? And the link
Mhm.
between those. So I can see you guys both like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
yeah.
sorry, I don't mean to jump back in, but I find this interesting already because I can hear your achiever coming through. Like the goal is
Mhm.
the most sort of the most important part. Whereas if
Mhm.
I look at my number one, mine was learner. I know Jen was giving me a hard time about it at the very top of the show, but my the journey of the learning is actually can be sometimes more important. Yes, it has to be aimed at something, and that's part of the reason why we've done this whole season is really getting to the aiming my talent. So
Mhm.
yes, I need to aim my learner at something, but I find it just a really wonderful nuance to point out very early that the way you think about professional development is achieve the goal, whereas
Yeah.
I look at professional development as what can I learn today? What's the process that I get
Mhm.
to go through? Not necessarily
Mhm.
with the goal as the end all be all. So it's just interesting. We're already starting to see some differences in how people look at professional development. Um, and neither is right or wrong. It's just a
Right.
difference that to be aware of.
And
So
you
anyway,
bring up such a great point, right? Because my experience definitely kind of is being shared with think about as a if you're looking to improve your performance or you're looking to just make sure are you on track, right? And this is my achiever, you can hear it. And it doesn't mean, right? And that's it doesn't mean that learning outside of that aim isn't
yeah,
valuable. And I think that's really, really important.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Jen,
All
you've got
right.
Achiever high in your top five. I can't.
Oh,
I'm
she's
curious, like where do you
checking
stand on this?
checking all my boxes, Chad. She's checking all my boxes. And I think what I love about this structure that you've just given everyone, Cindy, with this 3 specific goals. Specific, I think, is also really
Yeah,
important. I'm not really a goal setter. At least I don't feel like I am. That's not been a thing. I think that's more of a discipline theme. And that's low for me. Um, but I like the idea of that, like that goal, but what does success look like? Like thinking of it in terms of that, not actually like what does success look like for me? And then determining like what that goal is then based off of what that success looks like. Because that could be a way to actually write the goal is understanding what that success would look like for me, as opposed to this is the goal, and then that's what success looks like. I was looking at it backwards to help me figure out
Mhm.
what that goal might be.
Mhm.
And then tying those strengths into it. And I think that's where this part of this has really like pulled on me is that I am a hands-on learner. So I definitely learn best by doing,
Right.
Reading alone does not get me there unless I can somehow visualize myself doing the things that I'm reading about. It's really difficult for me to go through that stuff. I love to try and fail, but we're not always in environments where we're allowed to, like Chad says, sometimes it's we're like we're on the field. It's game day. We have to do the thing. And if you didn't get a practice session and you didn't get to try this before game day, I think it's a little harder. You know, the stakes are high, it's a little more stressful. And I love to practice things because that's where I learn the most. Like I can learn if I watch someone else do it. Now I'm like, okay, this is what I would do different. This is what speaks to me. Those are some of those things. And I think in order to find a place to like think about what that success might look like or what those performance metrics might be, I think it's like it means we need a safe place to do that. Like we can't talk about that stuff if we're feeling unsafe to begin with. And so that was the part of this is that if you're setting up that structure that you're talking about, you're automatically putting that like safe place in place. Maybe that's not the right word to use there, but
Yep.
you're setting the structure, you're setting the stage for there to be a safe place for us to talk about what those things look like.
Right. That's a great point. And, for an organization, if you have, our relationships with our supervisors and our managers are always a work in progress, right? So having
Right.
open, great relationship with your supervisor to say, hey, can you help me with this? These are my goals. Can we tweak them a little bit? And oh, this is how I see my strengths helping me get there. Can you work on that?
Yeah.
One thing that I was just thinking about, which is a great example of how our strengths can support us in learning and also take us off task, perhaps, right? Is
Oh,
I have this strength called input as number two, right? And so everything is interesting, so curious, and I will listen to podcasts and read and take notes and Google Docs with links, right? And it's very, Chad's going like, it's
no.
very messy learning. Um,
Sure.
and it's so enjoyable, like so enjoyable. And there isn't always, this is just my personal experience, right? And for those of you who have input that are listening, you're going to be like, yes, there's not a goal in mind other than just gathering. And I have input and learner too, right? So it's gathering, 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 going down big rabbit holes, and then often coming out with some really random information and areas of learning and perhaps expertise that may or may not be useful now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But may be incredibly useful down the road. Um, so I was thinking about that when we were talking about the difference between like very focused, goal-centered kind of learning,
Mm-hmm.
and that's an example of not that.
Yeah. Look, for those of you watching the video, you'll see a big smile on my face as Cindy was saying all that because I immediately thought of input and learner kind of talent themed cousins. I mean they can look similar at times. They do have some nuances and some very clear nuances. Um, but the idea of going down rabbit holes, that is a learner, that can be a learner talent, but it's usually a little bit more on the raw side. It's not as aimed, it's not as refined. um, but the idea of going down rabbit holes and exploring a lot of different information all at the same time. I do also have input a little further down my list. I always forget which rank it takes, but I know that when my learners in play, usually input is like tagging along somewhere in the background, um, kind of lurking. And so
Lurking.
what you were saying there about the professional development, and you know kind of being goal oriented versus just learning for learning's sake, does definitely resonate with me. What I found interesting about what you were saying, Jen, about the hands on, being able to do, my learner in a relation and also in partnership with some of my other talent themes, connectedness is in there, analytical is in there, even a little bit of discipline. Um, I need to learn with others. So I my notes for this episode were a little bit of like I have love hate relationships with conferences. They're great for tons of information given to me all at the same time, but unless the facilitator is good enough in say a breakout session to actually have people communicate with each other,
Mm.
I take tons of notes and my learner gets fed, but then I don't really have a chance to like process it or think about like how does this become applicable to me. And unless I have partners I know back in my home institutions that are willing to help me start to like pull it apart and figure out how it works for our institution, then it just ends up being just a whole lot of learning for not a whole lot of like purpose, like what you were saying, Cindy, in terms of it having a goal. But the idea of being able to converse with people and dissect ideas and think about the idea from a couple different perspectives, that's someplace where my professional development, I would love more of that. That's why like my grad courses were much more impactful than say going to a conference every year. It's why getting certified with Gout, you're there for a full week with 40 people, structured very thoughtfully, being exposed to a lot of different people from a lot of different with a lot of different talents. You get to peel everything apart and then put it back together again, and then figure out what works for you. So
Mhm.
I just found it interesting you talking about, oh, I've got a hands-on do it versus I'm a little bit like, okay, let's talk this out first, then let's go do it. And I see that as a big difference between say Jen and I and Cindy, your thought on making this a very goal sort of straight line um X to
Or
Y
maybe not straight line.
was well, I know Sydney loves to think in big strategic ways, but
Yes.
the way the connection she was making between like talents to
Yes.
goals and then having the learning and the professional development happen in the space between that. I thought that was a really nice analogy, by the way.
Mhm.
It just got me my
Good.
learner
And
thinking a little differently.
and I think when I'm thinking about professional development and learning in organizations, it's hard for me to tease apart just with my HR background. Um, how that can be put to great use for an individual and a team to be
Mhm.
successful, right? So if the learning is aimed, um, and sometimes even aimed together, right? A team can succeed, which helps the organization succeed. Um, and it's all this beautiful thing that's kind of in sync. And that's, I guess, when I think about helping organizations or teams learn. That's kind of where that's more coming from. It's interesting when Jen started and you were talking about how you think about learning, and I was making notes and thinking about this. I literally wrote like, how do you best learn? What are you motivated by? It's like almost some of the exact same things.
Mhm.
And learning styles to me means like how do you learn? How do you learn best? And then connecting, like often we will say, like, I learn best by, like you were saying, Chad, with others in a group, or I learn best working alone, or I learn best by listening. Um, I know someone who is an auditory learner, and she can just sit and listen, not take notes, and
Mm.
learn. And it's like wild because I can't do
Yeah.
that. I kind of my why I have to write things down and I have to, like you were saying, like talk things through, right? So there's so many different kinds of learners, but I think the clues are actually in our strengths,
Mhm.
right? So when people say, like, I need time, right, to learn, it's not just one strength, but it could be someone with intellection,
Yeah.
someone with deliberative, like you were saying, Chad, someone with like all the strategic thinking themes that I have. Like, I really need time to sort of ruminate,
Mhm.
marinate, like write it out, draw pictures, think about it, and then it somehow all comes together.
Yeah.
And sometimes it feels like I used to think that I was procrastinating, but it's I listened to an Adam Grant podcast about that. And it's not necessarily procrastinating. It's like your brain isn't ready yet to bring it
Mhm.
all
Yeah.
together. Um, so that's like a good way for me now to think about my strengths because it's fine. Like
Mhm.
Yeah.
on time. It's just that sometimes it doesn't come together until close to when it needs to come together. That makes, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
learning all those things that we talk about, learning by doing, learning by touching, experiential, the clues to what that means are the specifics are in our strengths reports, I think.
Yeah. That,
Yeah.
and I love how you just answered that, Cindy, because you actually answered the question I was just prepping to ask, which is like, which themes do you find really helpful in addressing your own professional development? I loved how you touched on all your strategic thinking themes and how
Hmm.
that rumination. I know I don't remember the exact title of that podcast by Adam Grant, but I know I've listened to that one about
Hmm.
the difference between procrastination and like really building in delays and
Mhm.
whether you're actually procrastinating or whether you're actually just giving yourself time to think it through. I wish I could remember the name off the top. My input is now like, all right, where's that
No, wait.
Rolodex? But
And of course,
yeah,
your deliberative loved that episode because you're like, see, I'm not delaying for no good
yeah,
reason.
right, yes. Um, I Cindy, you answered that wonderfully. We've already touched on a lot of things. I want to make sure, Jen, you had an opportunity to maybe poke at that question a little bit,
Oh,
just in terms of
sure.
like, are there themes that have been really helpful for understanding how how your professional development needs to come to you? And I know you've talked a lot about your activator and being able to do hands-on stuff, but I didn't know if
Yeah.
there was anything else you wanted to dig into.
Well, I think the most the where I've struggled the most is when, I'm given like anything we talked about it before, this stack of stuff and they're like read this and like now and then you're going to go and do. Oh Lord. That's so hard for me. And I think there's so many people who learn really well from reading. I am not one of those people. And when I do read, that sounds like I don't read. When I do read, when it's something that's really important to me, when it is like part of this is where my belief ties in, right? This has purpose, this has meaning, this is important to me. I need to know it, I need to learn it. It means I have books that are written everywhere on the inside. So I could never loan my books out to anyone because they are covered in notes for how this applies to me, how this applies to my life, what I'm going to do different with it. Though, like, ooh, I don't highlight. That used to be the thing too, like in school, they're like, oh, well, highlight the important parts. So then, like, you can remember these important parts. That does not happen. What happens is Jen ignores what was highlighted. So instead, I'm rewriting or paraphrasing what that like part was that I would have highlighted. I'm paraphrasing it in in the columns around all of the actual typed written, because that's the stuff that when I can stop for a minute and put that into like real life action for myself, I think that's when I've learned the best from what I read. Um, it's funny, you were talking, Cindy, about the auditory learner. It's like, oh yeah, that's not me either. And most of the time it's because I'm so focused on, I need to listen to what's happening. If they say something that triggers something, I'm not quick enough to hit pause. I still just keep listening, but my brain is somewhere else, like thinking through the thing. So I think I get myself distracted in the achieving that I've listened to this thing, and I stop actually like the learning process. So I think there's a couple of things. My responsibility where I think it really helps, because I want to do things right, right? So like that learning process and going through the learning process with my responsibility really helps to make sure that I'm delivering quality in my doing. I think it can hurt because the perfectionist or perfectionism stuff can start to creep in and make that learning process a little more stressful for me. So that's where I feel like my belief or my responsibility kind of messes that up. And then the deliberative, um, I think it's great that I can go deep in the stuff that I'm reading and making sure that I'm connecting that with my life. The bad side of that is that it takes me forever to do that. So if the assignment was you're going to read chapters 1 through 4, and then we're going to talk about that next week, I might get through one chapter of that. And that one chapter will take me the entire week to do, which is why I do not do book clubs with people. I my achiever will be like, oh, you said that we're going to do this thing and we need to check off all these things and we're going to do it by that time. I'll want to do that, but I'll get nothing out of it. So it's really like understanding where that line is for me. And it might mean that if we are reading something, if that's the way that I'm set up to learn about this, I'm going to need lots and lots of time. And I don't know, like I'm curious, Chad, does your deliberative work that way too?
It can, especially when you talk about books. I take my time through books. I may not make as many maybe as many notes as you do, but when it shows up in two ways when it comes to books. One, I'm very thoughtful about which books I buy,
Oh, yeah.
because I want my learner, my deliberative get together and be like, I want trusted sources and
Mhm.
analytical uh, to a certain sense, because I want to make sure that the data, I really don't enjoy books that are written on anecdotal examples. I
Oh,
want
yeah.
more than, give me an
The data.
anecdotal example, but I want to see, okay, this is just a case study of a much larger trend or something. Um,
Yeah.
so it makes me very thoughtful about which books I do buy and invest time in, but also how I go through them. I do still
Yeah.
highlight a little bit or I'll underline. I've started to develop my own, I've tried to get better at understanding the best ways I learn. Um, but that also brings me back to like a lot of the conference stuff or how I go through graduate courses are very, very different. And because there's not that time, I loved what Cindy was saying about having that time to ruminate.
Hmm.
Conferences are really great. Like learner gets all jazzed up, like all this information coming at you at once. Yeah, you're bouncing from breakout room to breakout room, or then to a keynote.
Yeah.
That's great. But then the talents that have to sit on the back bench, and don't get to play are deliberative and disciplined and analytical, and they
Hmm.
don't have that time unless the conference has been really thoughtful and building in that time. I love what you were saying, Cindy, about people with intellection or deliberative, building in that time for them to process and think, you know, go to a quiet corner, go to a quiet room and be able to rethink through what they just listened to, I think is really key. And I think when we think about professional development within the workplace, I think our leaders and managers should be taking that into consideration. Like Jen is going to need to do stuff.
Yes.
Cindy and I are going to need maybe some quiet spaces to like, okay, how do we sort this all out? Or can we get together with a couple trusted friends and figure, a couple trusted colleagues and figure this out? So I think just bring that back to the grander scheme as much as I could talk about how I go through books all day long. But yeah, there's a pause button that I need to hit every once in a while, when it comes to books. Um, this has been a fantastic conversation. Jed, I know you have another question
Well,
brewing.
I'm actually really curious to know because Cindy's achiever number one and it's my number two, where I think it helps me with my being able to like I'm like pre-motivated. I would say like that's like already built into me. I'm motivated to do the things and complete the tasks. I think it leads me to finding really efficient ways. So I was curious, Cindy. I also can get really stuck in the busy work. So I was curious, like, do you have this like thing too where if there's so many tasks to do, I can end up getting like over focused on the task, the busy work, and maybe not the most important or efficient things that I could be doing. Do you struggle with that as well?
Are you asking more like about overusing our achiever?
Yeah. Yeah. Does that happen?
Oh yes. Oh yes. And then if I catch myself, I think, okay, how can I make sure that I stay on like focused on the highest priority, right? And
Yeah.
pull in that strategic in the strategic thinking domain to get me going. And then I have activator as well. So,
Yep.
right. So do it fast, do it now.
Yes.
Sometimes that achiever and that achiever, oops, sorry, that achiever and activator
Hmm.
together really, is challenging. It gets in
Yep.
the way. It's like, "Ugh." Um, so yeah. Um,
Chad, are you hearing a normal theme that we talk about regularly on the show with the achiever activator
Well,
frustrating us?
well,
We talk about that
yeah,
a lot, Cindy.
yeah, starting stuff and then just went.
Yeah, we just
Like, are you
would
talking
just
about
do
the busy
like
work?
just
Yeah,
we're
just do.
just due. Yeah.
Yeah,
And like the start gets is so exciting that then like the doing becomes so exciting and we're just like yeah, it's hard to rein that in. That's part
yeah,
of what I loved and why I asked the question is because I was leading to that how we can intentionally use our strengths to meet those specific performance goals that you talked about at the beginning and then that what that success looks like because it might not be me using my activator and achiever but might instead be like using more my deliberative or more my responsibility or my adaptability like there may be other ones like that Chad was saying like I'm going to need to bench my activator for a bit because I need that to just calm down so we can get like the right things in order. And that's just one of the things that I've loved about these conversations is because even though we have similar talents, because of all the different blends of each of us, it comes out differently. And I love seeing that blend and how they're different in each person. So
yeah.
right.
thank you for taken on my just random question, my pointed question where I was asking you if you're a crazy person like me. Um, I think so. People I think learn best when they feel safe to experiment, when they feel safe that they can fail, and it's going to be a growing experience, not like a failure and complete mess. And I think spaces like that can encourage all of that psychological safety that we talk about all the time
Mhm.
even in those safe places, I think that sometimes we can get to places where or people can tend to feel like they are struggling to be seen or heard. Maybe even their value is being questioned or they're questioning their own value in the space. So I'm curious, Cindy, how you think or what advice you could give or provide for someone who is in that space where they are struggling with their performance development or having a line to some performance development and their learning styles and then just struggling with that like being seen and heard. Do you have any advice?
Yes, I guess the thing that comes to mind the most is when we're really aligned and understand our talents, we can ask better questions, we can learn better, right? We have better
Yeah.
relationships with our managers, all those things. So I think I'd just start with, someone really focusing in on how do they best learn and grow and
Yeah.
exploring that, looking at their their strengths reports, having conversations with their manager and saying, I want to learn and grow. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really excited about this company and my role here. I need your help. Um, I've always thought of myself as someone who learns hands-on. Can we look
Mm-hmm.
at my reports together and talk through exactly how I might use, my achiever, my activator, my woo, right? I have a strength called woo. I'm very motivated by book groups because I feel
Mm-hmm.
so accountable to all those people and I want to see them. I have book group tonight, actually.
Oh,
I do with my friends, yes. So
Awesome.
that's so motivating to me because I get to see people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. Yeah. So I don't know, does that answer
It
your
does. I think it like
question?
it reminds me
Hmm.
where my bend is to learn by doing, but that doesn't mean that and in most cases I find that when I've been in professional development spaces, when I've been at conferences, when I've been to even classes in some respect, the learning isn't by doing, the learning is by reading. And if we are going to do, it's going to be pretty far down the line.
Mhm.
So for me in those spaces, I can start to feel like I am just drowning. Like I said before about the whole reading the 4 chapters by next week, and like, yeah, that's not going to happen. I'm going to get through one, and then I'm going to be behind from now on. Um, and the first time you get behind, I think
Mhm.
that's when you start to feel like no one understands what you're going through and you don't know how to catch up. And you start to put yourself in this place where then you're like, let me just fade into the background so no one notices that I'm not at the same place
Mm.
as everyone else. And I think that's a really dangerous place to be, right? Because we start to feel shameful about the ways that we learn best. So if we can learn to recognize that like everybody has a different learning style and advocate for yourself, being able to reach out to whoever that is, whether that's manager or your team leader, whoever. In this instance, when you're feeling like you're behind and you're trying to put yourself in the shadows because you don't want anyone to notice, that it's okay to reach out and say like, I need to find a different way. I love that you were talking about that, having that advocacy, how you work best, how you learn best, and then being able to share that with someone so they can help you along that journey.
Right,
As I don't,
right.
I think we tend to treat others the way we want to be treated, right? Like the golden rule. And we've realized through strengths, like we need to treat others the way they want to be treated or need to be treated, need to have like what they need, meeting their needs, as opposed to meeting our own needs and then thinking like, oh, well, doesn't everybody need that?
So,
Apparently not.
Jen,
Right.
Good. Go ahead.
I found something you just said really interesting because you and I have talked a lot about how responsibility talent themes show up,
Mm.
and that whole like feeling responsible for finishing the assignment. I'm wondering if that come. I'm posing part curiosity here, part I resonate with it a little bit, but I'm wondering if that sentiment might be being influenced by our responsibility talent themes, and there might not be others that feel that pull of, oh, I need to finish the I'm not
Possibly, yeah.
I'm not disparaging anything you just said. I think it's all awesome, and I think that for a lot of people that is very much at play. We all want to show up as professionals. We all want to be seen as
Mhm.
competent, um, and so yes, there's that aspect of that might end up leading us to go into the shadows a little bit. But I just found it interesting. I could hear a lot of your responsibility coming through, and I
Mhm.
thought that was interesting. It just part the question of, okay, what does drive people into that unseen space, and is
Mhm.
it just that, or is it something else? And so
Right.
I think that's
So
a really
many
key
things.
question. Yeah, to build on what Cindy was saying, like that's the conversation that needs to happen with the individual and their leader of, okay, what does make you feel unseen, unheard, backed into a corner, not willing to
Yeah.
participate, etc. um, the
Well,
other
I'm
thing that
even thinking, Chad, that you when you were talking about the conferences, like if this is a big like space where we're doing all of these things and but you didn't get time to really sit with it when you and Cindy both had shared, like you need the time to sit with
yeah
the information. And if everyone else is often doing
yeah
and you haven't had the time to sit with it, like I could see you guys kind of coming into that same place where you might be like, oh, everybody's
yeah
like left me in the dust. I'm back here still like processing
yeah
the information and everyone else is 6 steps farther than me. And then what
yeah
does that do and how does that feel? And those are the kinds of things I think just recognizing how diverse our learning styles are and how our talents play into those
yeah
um, really help to create those environments where it's okay that we're different. Yeah.
yeah
Sorry,
Yeah.
I
yeah
stepped over you. I didn't mean to.
yeah yeah
No, I was just thinking, one of the things that I would like to, like, if something that could really change, have a huge, profound impact, right, on people and organizations and teams is during onboarding, right?
Hmm.
If, let's say, organizations do their strengths assessment, the individual has it, right? Not just stopping there, but asking a really important questions. Let's talk, how do you best learn? Let's
Yeah.
have a conversation. How do you best learn? Let's make notes, let's review that. And if a manager understands that, and sometimes a new a new employee, a new team member, they haven't really thought about it that much. They do
Right.
the strengths assessment. They're like, cool, yeah, this is me, but it's a great way to start a conversation about what's right with people, what makes
Hmm.
them, what helps them be motivated, and what helps them be their best. So just asking that question and embedding that in onboarding, like
Yeah.
how do you best learn? Let's explore that. And then, they'll figure out, I don't know, if someone has harmony, like let's find as many opportunities for them to build consensus and build bridges. And,
Yeah.
let's look at I don't know, someone that has high empathy, right, is going to take a people-centric approach to
Hmm.
everything they do. That's going to motivate them and that's going to help them to learn, right? So having the
Yeah.
manager understand that someone that has command, right? A new employee that has command, you better give them something to be in charge of, right? Even
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
they're brand new, give them something. They will
Yes.
be their best and they will be motivated and then to learn. And one of my favorites with restorative, some of the companies that I
Mm-hmm.
work with that do onboarding, if they hire someone that is sort of restorative, I'm like, let's find something that they can solve now. They will be a rock
Yeah.
star. They will be seen, they will be heard, others will rally around them. And it's
Yep.
usually really easy for someone with restorative in their first like month to do something that's noticed. And that's just
Yep.
using their strengths. It's about performance, but it's about learning too, because it's going to motivate them.
I love that.
Cindy, you're starting to pull out a thread that I wanted to bring into this
Yes.
conversation, which is um, your comments about how people uh, learn and what they want to professionally develop, and how their talents come to that.
Mhm.
Makes me think of Simon Sinek's Golden Circle model.
Mm-hmm.
The why, the how, the what.
Mhm.
So we've talked a lot about sort of the middle ring of the how. I think what you're actually starting to touch on, you mentioned command, you mentioned restorative, you mentioned oh my goodness, there was another
Empathy, I
great
think,
empathy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Empathy.
I don't
Hmm.
know.
Okay. So think about those, going one step deeper in why is this professional development important to you? Okay, so oh yes, I want to be better at being in charge of things. Okay, so I don't want to necessarily always lead from the front, but how do I sort of command from the middle, or
Mhm.
have the
Yeah.
responsibility but rally people around me. Um, and empathy, is why is this particular professional development experience or opportunity really important to them? Why would they want to do that? So I think that that's another component. If you're having these conversations with
Mhm.
within the team, leader to individual contributor, really, or even at that onboarding stage, okay, what inspires your professional development? Because my why is I just love to learn stuff, right? I've got learner number one. That's
Right.
no secret to anybody that's listened to any episode of this podcast. My learning is purely for the enjoyment of learning something new. If I can apply it, even better, right? If I can aim it at something, like Cindy was talking about at the beginning, if I can aim my learning at something, that's a perfect trifecta of a professional development opportunity.
Yep.
Um, but the why for the two of you with your activator and achievers is going to look different than the command, than the restorative. Jen, I
Right.
thought a lot about your belief, and what's the core belief behind developing yourself, and
Hmm.
what does that inspire you to do, and what opportunities do you look for? So I think I would just add that that's like the add-on to, or it might even be the core of the statements that Cindy you were making, which I thought were great.
Hmm.
It's just like the what is really sort of how we utilize our professional development, but the
Yep.
how and the why are really driven by those talents. So I wanted to expand a little bit on what Cindy was saying, which I thought was fantastic.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
um, we've already
Well, and
started
it,
kind of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say, and it kind of led right into like I'm guessing you're going to go to next is that management discussion, right? With the
Yeah,
new manager.
yeah. So the question we've already started to touch on, and I'm just going to pose sort of the question so that people can find this question in the podcast, but also so that we can flesh this out. a lot of people I work with, Cindy, are brand new managers, or they are still trying to figure out like how to, run frontline operations. They've probably been promoted out of an individual contributor role, and so just thinking about how they can best use their talents to guide either their own professional development or their team. We've already started to talk a little bit about that with the why, and you talked a little bit about the how. Um, but is there anything else you would add in terms of helping brand new managers figure out how to professionally develop themselves or their team members?
Um, Gosh, that's an important question.
Mhm.
The thing that comes to mind, and this is so basic, but the thing that comes to mind is to talk about it. So often we have brand new managers that think they don't know what they don't know, and they're
Right.
not really sure where to start, and everything's so overwhelming. Um, so I always recommend like for brand new managers, talk to your manager about what it is that they would recommend. What are the top three things that you'd recommend that I spend time and energy on learning? And they could be very technical things. They could be often they're like conceptual things, or, and somebody
Right.
might say, read this book, but then what do you do with that learning? Like there has to be
Right.
a feedback loop, right?
There's
Mhm.
going to be the doing that Jen wants.
Right. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I think a conversation, but then also a, a conversation with people outside of your organization that you admire, that you have found you connect with, ask them. Like when you were in my position, when you were in my role, what helped you? You may get
Mhm.
really great advice and wisdom, and you might get some random things that make no sense, which is fine, right? But if you ask, Uncle Charlie, like, how did you find success when you were a brand new manager? They may give completely different advice that's
Mhm.
really useful about big picture stuff. And
Yeah.
someone being able to, sometimes people forget that it's really all the relationships we have that matter most. It's talking to someone, whether it's on Zoom, on the phone, Teams, it's in person. Wouldn't that be lovely? But talking to people and working things through is often the key, especially when it comes to learning. Like with someone with Relator, for example, and they're trying
Mhm.
to learn something, I always ask in a coaching session, like, who is it that you'd like to meet with? And maybe just go schedule a one-on-one monthly with that
Mhm.
person. That will feed your Relator. Um, you've identified a person that you'd like to learn from. Not really sure exactly. You might have one thing in mind that
Right.
you want to learn from that person, but you'll probably learn a lot more and develop that relationship. Um, so yeah, I think conversations, and you can imagine if I were to I don't have a whiteboard, I just have big giant post-it notes everywhere. But if I were to do a big whiteboard, right, I'd have like circles and I'd have the person in the middle and then all the different ideas about who they want to talk with
Yeah.
to support their learning. And yeah, I think that's kind of number one and often forgotten
Yeah.
because people
Yeah.
don't know what they're supposed to learn next. And then people can pick and choose, right? You can't do it all, but
Yeah.
choose one thing, right?
Chad,
Nice.
you know what this is reminding me of is our conversation about onboarding with Damien, and where he talked about networking where you work. And
Oh,
Cindy was
yeah.
just sharing like it's a lot of the same conversations, right? It's having these conversations with others you work with, and the motivation for that conversation might be completely from different points of view, right? Like you might
Right.
be trying to learn something, you might be just trying to connect with someone else, you might be trying to learn how someone else does something so that you can do the thing like they do well. Whatever the reason behind the motivation, or whatever that motivation reason is for us, I do think that connection is really important. And I love the idea of like spending the time with all these different people and getting their take on that. Because someone might tell you something that you've never heard before, and it triggers something that changes your understanding of now something that you're working with. So I love that, Cindy.
And you know how
Thanks so
sometimes
much.
like you'll tell someone something and they really don't, it doesn't resonate. Like
Mm-hmm.
it often takes four, five, six times
Right.
before you actually hear something and might want to act on it. So
Right.
sometimes it takes that many different touch points uh,
Mm-hmm.
when you're listening. So
Yeah.
and maybe that's my woo looking at, you know,
Well, so it's interesting you bring that up, Cindy,
all the
because
people.
yeah, well, it's interesting you bring that up in terms of sort of the people aspect. And yes, I would agree, Jen, that it does. Now that you pointed out, it definitely. Uh, I mean, it's a mirror of what Damien was saying about
Mm-hmm. Love
networking
that.
where you work.
Cool.
Um, but one of the thoughts I had coming into this, and I love that you brought up Woo because I was also thinking about if I was helping a new manager, understand their how they want to professionally develop, I would also be thinking about sort of who do they want to develop with.
Mhm.
So I pulled out three examples, and two of which, Cindy, you've almost clairvoyantly brought up already, Relator and Woo, because the three examples I came up with were in election, they might want to develop all on their own. They might not want to do the networking that we're talking about. They need to
Mhm.
read something, they want to think about it, and then they want to put it in play, probably through some of their other talent themes. But they might be very similar. And I'm painting with a very wide brush. So those with
Sure.
intellection don't
Mhm.
come screaming after me. Just in generalities here. But intellection is maybe they want to develop on their own. Relator might want to just find that small group of trusted learning partners
Mhm.
that they want to process things through. Cindy, I think you were mentioning, you might just find one, maybe two people that you really want to have that safe space with and try things and professionally develop in a certain way. But then we come into the really sort of big circle themes, right? Woo, and the other one I actually thought of was Includer.
Mhm.
They
Oh,
might want very large environments where conferences might be the primo location for their professional development because I think about like Sydney, you're always wonderful when we see you at conferences. I know Charlotte Blair is another one of our you know um, friends in the coaching community, and she's always high woo and talks about that a
Right.
lot. And
Yeah.
making the connections all over conferences when we see her out at the Gallup Summit. Um,
mhm.
but those sorts of themes want big groups of people to develop with versus maybe the election or relator. And those are just two examples. We could probably dive in all 34 and figure out, what's the right size. But it's all going to be individualized. And I think that then goes back to the comment you were making, Cindy, about having the conversation. Who do you like to work? Who do you like to learn with? Who do you want to professionally develop with? And how many people?
Mhm.
What does your network look like? To kind of borrow off of Damien's idea
Right.
that Jen just re-brought up. So anyway, I thought it funny that you brought up Relator and Woo. I was like, wait a minute, those are two of the things I wanted to talk about, and she's already doing it just a variation of what I was.
Oh.
So
Awesome.
anyway,
And one
um,
thing I wanted to add when you were talking about intellection, right? There's that learning that's that deep, deep learning that's quiet, that's on their own, and then finding thought partners,
Yes.
right? Finding like deep thinking, like I'm going in, right? Thought
Yeah.
partners that they can just bat around those ideas with and go deep
Hmm.
and go wide, and it's a super safe space because if those with intellection don't have those, I've had people tell me like I'm that guy that brings up these weird topics and everyone
Yeah.
stares at me, right? And at a family reunion or they need thought partners big
Mhm.
time. So anyways, that just you just reminded me of that, Chad. one of those needs for intellection and
Yeah.
learning, right? Learning like that.
Yeah. And Jen, I wasn't uh, trying to leave out your very action oriented themes. I know
Oh,
you
you're fine.
you lead with a ton of executing, but I mean, I also think about people with like ideation that are really about that instantaneous, getting to action, getting ideas on the table.
Yeah.
How does this tie together
Mhm.
with other things? What can we take action on? That's a whole other stream of professional development that you're probably more adapt to talk about than I am. But I got thinking about, Cindy and I are over here doing a lot of the relationship building and the thinking themes, and I
Yeah.
just thought, you know, do you have any thoughts on that about like what kind of partners or who you would develop best with from an action kind of standpoint?
That's a great idea. I love those with ideation. I do have to know though going in, they're going to give me a million ideas and it doesn't necessarily mean that any of them are great. Right? Like, and even they will say to me, like, well, I just gave you four ideas, but actually I don't like any of those. I like this one better. Like let's look at this thread instead. So I think just understanding, and that's one of those things, like knowing yourself, like if you know the other person has high ideation, and you go to them with the question like, what do you think I should do about this, and like they're going to provide you all these different ideas, you're just there to listen right in this moment. Like we're not going to necessarily do anything about those ideas right this minute because you just created this like popcorn machine, right? And while some of the kernels popped quickly, other ones might take a little while, and those other ones might be the one that you really want to start on. And so I've had so many conversations. I have a very close friend now who has high ideation. Oh my goodness. And input. And the amount of things that come my direction. One, between her ideation, just having all these different ideas, and then to the input, like she has all the backup, all the data and things that I would need for it. Oh, so many books. Again, also high learner. But what I've learned is that most of the time, within a half hour or an hour of having our initial conversation, there's other stuff brewing like just below the surface. And so having that person be close to me, like I know that now I've created like started the fire like so to speak on them, and they're thinking about things and having like some of these other ideas, and they might, because they love me too, they may come back to me like within the next hour to half hour and be like, you know what, I was thinking about this some more, and what about, and then they like provide all these other ideas. That I love.
I
I
love
absolutely
that.
love those connections because it does feed my activator and my achiever. Because if it's what they say like sparks me, I can quickly move into action. So love the idea of like finding these other like complementary partners that can help with like creating this momentum for me as an achiever, as a high executing. Um, One of the other things I really liked about what you guys were talking about is that while you didn't say the words, you're talking about having all these different conversations. You're talking about these like more regular check-ins, although you didn't necessarily say that. Like you're talking about having these conversations, these ongoing conversations. You're creating this like safe space. And what I love most about the safe spaces is that if the new manager knows they can create this space for the trial and error to happen, it can work well for all of the Clifton Strengths themes. Like, I think that we all need our own pause button to sit for a moment in whatever it is that we're doing, or to try something new, to work on something different, maybe come at it from a different way than the way everyone else is doing. And we've talked about this before, Chad, about this like having the like practice day experiences, being able to practice things before it's important on game day. And so I think that, that creating that psychologically safe space in order for those things to happen is really important and really great for a new manager to do. The maybe one thing I would offer for a new manager too is for them to check their blind spots.
Yeah.
Because if they are like me and they are doers, they might have been promoted, right? We talked about that a lot. if this is a new manager who used to be like the rock star on the team and now got promoted to be the leader of this team, they are used to doing. And so when they teach new people, they might teach them the doing things and like you need to do it this way with the like this specific process, and that may not be the way their team learns best. So back to that, having the conversations about how you learn best and what how you can use your talents, those performance, setting those specific performance goals, I think those all blend really well into realizing that your way might not be, as manager, your way might not be the best way for every person on your team, and just respecting and understanding that that's the case, and then just asking them like what they think might work best for them, giving that space for them to try that and see if that works better for them.
Yeah, it's very it's interesting that both of you have brought up the conversation piece because that was one of the other big points I was going to make, and I think you've
Yeah.
covered a lot of the same ground that I have. Where I see the tie between what I was going to mention, what you've already said, is that this actually cycles right back to the beginning of this conversation that Cindy, you talked about having specific goals, um, and then having those one-on-one check-ins to create the safe space to
Yeah.
then also have the safe space to talk about, okay, what is the professional development? What's the learning you need to have to get to complete those goals, like what Cindy was talking about at the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where I see the sort of the through thread that brings us all together for a new manager is make sure you're having those conversations because you'll understand what opportunities to be on the lookout for to be like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this might have great information, but it's a conference that my person doesn't really jive with conferences. They need a doing experience, or they need a book, or they need a
Yeah.
book club. They can keep their eye out for the right ideal professional development experience for that person based on their themes and based on what that person needs to achieve. Um, so, and I also think just from a broad perspective, we know this about talent development is it is most important for us to have opportunities to develop the themes that we already have. So
Mm-hmm.
sending me to a place to like Toastmasters where a leader might be trying to get me to be more like, more woo, you know,
Sure.
characteristics,
Yeah.
um, that's not going to work. Like that's not the realm or what's going to be most impactful for me. It's okay, you have learner, you have deliberative. How can we make you a better risk assessor? How can we make
Mm-hmm.
you better at evaluating Excel spreadsheets with your analytical? How can we, what opportunities can we find to build those consensus? How do do we need to set, do you want to engage in a conflict resolution course? I'm just picking on a few of my own themes, but like
Yeah.
finding the opportunities that jive and line up with the themes is going to be far more useful and a better use of an organization's resources. So I think that's the only other thing. Just new managers, I think they all want to come in and make a big impact on their team and have them be sort of like jack of all trades. And we know that as coaches, that's not where you get your best bang for the buck. It's we want spiky people. We want people that
Right.
really excel in one or five areas that are really key to their job, and then line that up with the goals that Sydney was talking about. So, um,
Absolutely.
so,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Chad,
yeah,
when you were talking about that, I think you're so right, because when our learning styles can align with our natural talents, it's not that we're just more effective. We're also going to be, because you're aligning with my talents, I'm going to be more engaged in this professional development thing that
yeah,
you want to set me on. Like it's going to light me up in ways that, some of these other things wouldn't. And I think that's so important to remember from the manager side, is that
yeah,
like tailoring those developmental experiences to the person.
yeah.
Yeah. Love that.
Right.
Sydney, this has been an amazing conversation with you. I want to kind of give you the last word. Is there like one last like big takeaway that you would love to like land us on for the end of this show?
Ooh, well, let's see. I
Not
think
to put not to put too big a spotlight on you.
I think there's three things that I'd recommend around learning and professional development and then connecting it to performance management.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and they're really simple. Like one is keep your top five strengths, at least your top five in front of you at all times. You have your reports, you might have like a little plaque from your company, you have your strengths mugs, mugs. You have whatever you have, keep it right there, like, on a sign, tape it to your desk, just keep it on your screensaver. I put just something so that they're, super, super memorable. And then the second thing is like, what are you, what do you want to learn? And what are your performance goals? Right? So they're separate, but they're connected
Mhm.
when you think about your role. So, having that written down is really powerful, and then making a connection. How am I going to use my activator, achiever? This is me, a
Yeah.
strategic, like those three strengths. How am I going to use them to learn this new thing? AI, that's for me, right? How am I going to use those talents to dive in and make AI useful in my business? I think it's cool. I think it's interesting, but like, I gotta have I don't want to just dive in, right? I want to have the why with all my strategic thinking themes. So
Mhm.
tie is just an example. So
Yeah.
tying your strengths, what you want to learn, and your role together. And you can do it on one Excel spreadsheet, one Google Doc, like something that you can share with your manager. And
Mhm.
I would just recommend people do that. Share it with your manager and start a conversation. You might be really surprised how far that one kind of courageous conversation can take you, um, and
Yeah.
kind of streamline, activate, give you momentum for your learning and professional development.
Awesome. All
Yes.
right. Well, this has been a really informative conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, Cindy. It's been a pleasure to have you back as a guest. As we wrap up this episode, as always, I'm going to keep encouraging you to keep playing to your strengths.
And be uniquely you.
If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you find your podcasts.